Please welcome Lisi Raskin.
Hi, everybody. Nice to see you. Thank you for being here. I see some people who I really love and adore, and some new faces. And for those of you that are on your residency now, I just hope you're having the best time ever. It's always a pleasure for me to engage with this community. And I just figured I'd let you know that I am calling in from unceded Narragansett land. All right, can everybody see that? All right, cool. So the title of this talk it's complicated because my practice isn't a linear way of contending with my concerns. So I'm just gonna let it be messy because I feel like that's the most honest way to go about this. And I hope that if there's anyone else out there who's also a little messy, you don't feel like you need to clean it up either. So I'll start with this moment in 2011. I'm starting here because it was the first time that I got to think along with a group of people about ideas that I was truly grappling with, really vulnerable ideas. And I got to be in dialogue with them for about 15 weeks. This 15 weeks thing on most places on planet Earth is called a semester. But this was an ambition that I couldn't figure out how to fulfill in the part of the art world that I had been participating in previously, because I had, exhibition schedules and lots of out-of-town travel plans to places where I didn't know anyone. And I couldn't seem to be someplace where I both had community, as in a longer term sense of having built trust and had conflict and resolved conflict with folks, and then build an installation there. But I did find in this moment that the classroom space was incredibly dynamic by comparison. There were few public facing pressures, but a sort of built-in audience. And we could be audience to each other, and we could build discourse. And this was really my first teaching experience where I caught a glimpse of the magic of the classroom and truly allowed myself to be moved by the vulnerability that I was witnessing. And I led with vulnerability as opposed to entering a teaching and learning space kind of armored up. And I brought the questions that I was truly grappling with, including the ones that I had no idea how to answer. And they had to do with this notion of the individual as it's elaborated in Western epistemological and philosophical frames. And this also included a recognition of my own indoctrination into these violent myths. So I'll just push through a little bit here so you can sort of see one corner of this is the Fab Gallery down at VCU. And yes, Reed Ramirez did unleash a 12-pack of Coke onto a white sweatshirt in a vacuum-packed bag. And we did throw clay at the wall, and that is one of Sam Winks's early furniture compositions. And yes, there is Reed and Veronica Pasova and Raywin Martin and Vlad Smolkin in action. And I believe the person with their back to us is Andrew Michelson. And that is Scott Whipke making a wall drawing and Vlad talking. And then there's Mamie Donsker and myself. So this kind of play was a departure in a lot of ways from my previous work, which was just up against this false notion that the so-called end of the world would unfold according to the Cold War myth of mutual assured destruction. So I had this idea in my head that it would play out in this particular kind of bunker-like architecture with a singular protagonist who is isolated and lonely and self-reliant, playing at some form of nuclear apocalypse sort of prepper subjectivity. And it's weird when I think about it now that I really got to travel to a lot of places kind of on this philosophical meal ticket. And I won't sort of say all the places, but there's a lot of boxes on this slide. And they represent the places. But I was just scratching my head, stepping back, wondering why did I get to work with this particular subject matter? Why was it so alluring at the time? And I sort of, as the years have gone by, I kind of realized that, what is what's been accepted, let's say, into the ruling class narrative, either as truth or fashion or fetish or commodity or all of the above, has also been pushed through institutions of higher ed, and we can read it in peer-reviewed studies, and it becomes part of knowledge with a capital K. And it's so particular. And a lot of what the part of the art world that I was like engaging with was involved with is this negative dialectic. So, I mean, and they weren't engaged with it like to like a terrible extent, or, you know, there was no terrible outcomes, but I just had to realize that it was a school of thought. And as I stepped away, I realized that my engagement with the school of thought made it hard for me to imagine what it was I wanted to see in the world, because I was so caught up in critiquing what I didn't want to see. I found myself in situations where I was even kind of obliterating my own lived experience, like with joy and mystery and like vision, like in order to occupy the protagonist in this weird story that was kind of publicized all over the mainstream anyway. Maybe bell hooks would have called this the dominator subject position. But I really had to ask myself why I was continuing to tell stories and make objects and references to things that I didn't want to see any longer. So this was like a big thing for me at the time. And in 2013, I went to Afghanistan on a like quote unquote research trip with the help of like amazing folks at Creative Time, Laura Rajkovic, Sally Swed, and Marissa Mazria Katz. And like that experience basically like ripped the psychic band-aid off my worldview. It was just like, it was done. I thought I was gonna like, you know, go look at Cold War monuments. You know, I had my back foot in like Cold War monuments, and sort of like, I kind of stepped into a thing and I was like, I don't even know what I'm gonna find. But this picture is from a panorama. You can kind of get on top of this hill called Swimming Pool Hill in Kabul, and you can see like a beautiful panorama of the city. And I was super surprised because the guy who's sitting with the white shirt on came up to, I was working with a translator, Hikmat Zahid, and the guy asked if I would take his portrait and show it to him, but I didn't understand because he was, you know, speaking, you know, Dari to Hikmat, and I was nervous. I was nervous and I was scared, and I wondered if I was like, holy shit, like who's this guy? What did I do wrong? What does he need? And this is because like my understanding about anything having to do with Afghanistan was 100% informed by Western imperialist, epistemological, philosophical media systems, you know, like the New York Times. You know, the New York Times as an object is invested in limiting the imagination of any of the subjects who engage with it. But, you know, here's the portrait. You know, I kind of took it with my 5D camera and like turned the little screen on the back of the camera around to show it to him. And I still think about this interaction to this day, because it taught me that I'm a brainwashed, indoctrinated person, and I know nothing. But as I sort of advance in life and become part of this larger project adulthood, I have to unlearn this garbage and relearn new ways of understanding the world. Because otherwise I'll be stuck in this Gordian knot invented by like some cis hetero white dude from like the 17th century, as opposed to being able to imagine and create all the other things that I dream about and I hope that I can manifest with people. So I really want to thank this guy. I don't know what his name is, but hey, listen, thanks. So I came home to New York with a desire to rekindle my relationship to like these core concepts that I had been reaching toward, like conflict and war and violence and trauma and survival. But I wanted to go about it in a different way, like not creating reproductions or representations of violent events, but rather like thinking about these as reconfigurations or recompositions of fragments and remnants. Like, how could this stuff actually move around in our collective and my personal epigenetic or like post-traumatic experiences? And I wondered if I could use the artifacts of my previous large-scale installations to focus on things like touch and care and intimacy and tenderness, like a kind of, I don't know, like a material and energetic alchemy that would help me gain access to what I felt were like elusive parts, elusive ideas. And I also wondered how configurations or compositions that were like precarious or impermanent or elusive and hard to know, like how would these things reassemble into anything? So the activity of creating this stuff was like a giant question, like including like what would it mean for these utterances to feel vulnerable as they reference violence and trauma? And I still have questions about whether or not painting is a good container for these investigations. But I don't even know if these are paintings, but here they are nonetheless. And here's a little guy that I made for the cat I live with, Bunny. So there's a way that like scaling up that intention and revisiting the making of installations brought up questions about like whether these arrangements could become the kinds of spaces that I could invite community and collaboration and sharing and really like communion, conversation, like all with the intention of providing care and opportunity for this kind of connection and love. So this is documentation of a piece called Recuperative Tactics, and it's really a very large installation. And I was able to invite an organization called Girls Right Now, based in New York City, that matches high school age femmes with professional femmes in the fields of coding and journalism and publishing. And it was incredibly rewarding for me to make like the stage and the plinth and the pedestal for like their event and like to display their work. So in this way, like the installation could expand its purpose beyond like the singular art exhibition and could fall back and become like a supportive architecture, although I'm not sure that it's architecture. I think it's pretty heavily anti-architecture, but support the work and the needs of others. And so in that vein, I did a project called Crafter Hours where folks could come work on the things that they wanted to work on these large studio tables that I had built for folks with supplies that were provided by the project budget. And everybody could leave their work on the palette, so they became part of the exhibition. And slowly but surely, this like solo commission by Lisi Raskin became a group show. And it could include everybody who stopped by and hung out. And it was actually like pretty beautiful as a way of like bringing, you know, materials and things from the studio that I had been using and then watching other people like touch these materials that were very much a part of like my vernacular. Like they touched the materials that I brought in and really injected them, I think with like a kind of humor and touch that I wasn't doing myself. And so that was also really profound, and it was a pleasure. It was a pleasure to watch people make things and hang them in the space and like talk to them about stuff. That was really great. And then sort of like meanwhile back in the studio, like I made this piece called My Person Flatland. And I just like found myself compelled by the question, like, what if every artistic utterance could resonate with the same kind of tenor? Like what would it look like to make a painting that was reaching toward the viewer or like presenting the viewer with like the real place, like a handle. So it was in some sense like the object was asking to be touched or carried. Or like a piece that was like, hey, I've been held, I've been handled, I've been touched. Or hey, I'm a precarious arrangement. Or I have a belly and it hangs over and slumps when I sit. Or this one, which in a lot of ways is a weird homage to like a bygone era where Ellsworth Kelly meets the logo of a now defunct airline that my grandmother worked for in the 70s and the 80s. Or this painting that like tries to consider the time I spent with my grandmother on the carpet of her living room, looking at the blue sky through the vertical blinds. And so these were like, you know, like intimate moments that then I was like, okay, what does it mean to then kind of proceed and like scale this up again somehow? And I like this orientation, like the orientation toward like being with, thinking through with, feeling with, listening to, playing, was just something that just imbued the process of making this, you know, 50-foot piece with like a different kind of joyfulness and a different kind of love. And it is true that I was like already at the point like where I didn't have to stress too hard because like I kind of understood my way around a large scale installation and stuff, but it just became more joyful and more beautiful. And it was really, really touching for this kind of like choreography to emerge. But it's really true that like the act of teaching was really what opened up my thinking around what was possible in certain moments of interaction. And so now I understand like every single interaction to be opportunities to formulate, like, not just ethical engagement with others, because that's a huge part of like what it means to be the, let's say, creative lead or like the named artist, and like a institutional opportunity. And ethical engagement is pretty much the backbone of what I believe it is to be a teacher and a learner, particularly in an institution. And what's really lovely is that sometimes relationships that begin as like teacher-student and really hierarchical in this way can like morph into a kind of creative companionship and friendships and fun. Obviously, I don't mean to like paint the picture that you know, a large-scale installation like doesn't require scaffolding, like it does, but like, you know, you kind of need structure to have successful play with groups until you know people really, really well, and then you all kind of co-create the structure and stuff. But like when I say structure, like I mean I always wanted to make like an enormous God's eye and like a massive woven wood painting installation. And doing that, I worked with Magda and Katya and Vladek, and they were students at the time. And when they signed up for the gig, they probably were just like, oh, we're going to be an assistant to this artist over the summer. But at a certain point, I was like, hey, like I didn't do all of this. Like we did this together. Like, what might it mean for you to be named on this commission as well? And honestly, I want to say, like, you see how it like becomes a rainbow. Like that wouldn't have happened without Wladek, because he's like, we need yellow. And it's just kind of like those moments are, that was everything. That like when the rainbow happened, like the piece kind of came to life. And I think like beyond that, it helped me in a very visceral way contend with and feel into the space of like authorship and ownership in my own professional sphere. And yeah, it's absolutely true. Like I'm super like not like, hey, yeah, rose-colored glasses, like capitalism and like capitalists and like people who are like gunning for a certain kind of career, like they'll absolutely take every opportunity to extract, you know, and sort of steal what you hand them. So like you kind of got to keep your wits about you. But in these interactions, what I've been finding more and more is that like the respect has to be there. And in this circumstance, the respect was there. And in the end, like they all put their names on a piece, and they have a piece in their hometown art museum, and they felt it was special, and I felt it was really special, and so it's kind of like, wow, this is super special. And so like on kind of the theme of super special, like lovely stuff, I want to talk about like a project that began in 2015, and at this point, and we're not like all together here, like we've been joined by other members who I will definitely name as we move on, but I just wanted to flag this moment in the summer of 2015 when we were still calling ourselves Poison. But we never got a cease and desist letter. But we've since changed our name to Peebls. But this was a moment where like we took a road trip from Philly to Louisville and performed inside of an installation at the Kentucky Museum of Art and Craft. And our performance was called Infinite Rehearsal, which like, again, was very much about like having it be okay and even naming the fact that the artwork was about being a work in progress and being playful and having fun and improvising and just allowing a space where we could all witness each other doing that. So in this slide, that's Teresa Cervantes is on drums, and Joanna Bellatier, I don't know what, oh, it's a xylophone, it's like a little kid's xylophone. Jorge Galvan next to Jojo is wearing something green and sparkly. Kelsey Scarroff's on the mic, and Philippe de Souza, I believe, is on the keys. And the band, like in particular, this group of people came out of another classroom scenario that I facilitated. And it came after we read a lot of complicated stuff. Like we read, you know, Moten and Hardy, The Undercommons. We read a ton of bell hooks. And we just kind of really got into these like fertile ideas and feelings. And at the end of the semester, like it was so good. Like I just didn't want it to end. So I was like, how, like, we gotta keep doing stuff. And I think Kelsey was like, let's make a band. And so we did. They made me a camo muumuu. I mean, who makes a camo muumuu? It's just so bright and like, just like how like Jorge and his like sparkle magic, and just like being able to be hams together and doing things like, you know, singing and realizing that we all had a relationship to music, even though that wasn't what, you know, the majority of our time together had been about. So yeah, but at the same time, what was going on in the studio was, well, like I wanted to make these underwear paintings. And I think probably like a lot of the processing and like deconstruction of like my own indoctrination kind of allowed me to get into some more vulnerable spaces about my own identity. And I hadn't ever really allowed myself to touch on my gender in my art practice at all, like except for like the meta narrative about the Cold War, which like it could be understood as masculine, like even if like militarized subjectivity and state violence like is obviously now open to all gender expressions. And like even if the cis imperialist feminists have like a really established military stronghold, I just sort of like hadn't explicitly taken the opportunity to make work about the fact that I'm masculine of center and disabled, and I wasn't out in the art world as a person with like a set of spinal injuries that make it incredibly complicated for me to use my body. And I hadn't tried to visually represent what nerve pain, like shooting down my left leg feels like in a pictorial sense. And I hadn't engaged with the contours of like my disabled body and like the sharpness or numbness, like at the same time that I'm playing with the trope of making a painting of a pair of underwear, like on a pair of underwear. So, you know, these are like my drawers. And, you know, like drawers are kind of gross. So like I wanted to paint the physical stain of use and somehow transcribe the vestiges of how my body, which is like, it's a fat body, like my body's a queer body, my body's a disabled body. My body interacts, like how does my body get to interact with mass-produced functional objects? And again, this pressing question, like could painting be a container for those ideas as well? Quick question, how's everybody doing out there? Thumbs? Still with me? All right, cool, thanks for that. I thought maybe I would show a music video, but I definitely need your feedback about whether this works, because sometimes things get all gunky when you try to show a video over Zoom, okay? So I can see you, and just let me know if you can see and hear this. Can you hear it?
Access denied to the supercomputer. Subjects in the mainframe wanted to rearrange the brain of the world. We cannot compute. To rearrange the brain of the world is incompatible with the natural laws of the universe. The scale is simply too large. Nature was a binary, thought in a coded language of us versus them. This is consistent with my algorithm. You're not supposed to be in here. Please exit immediately. Patriarchy made it a long, long time ago and pretended that people wouldn't know any better. Humans cannot be allowed to think for brain capacity like a computer, like me. And today our different tools, we know how to dance around and break the rules. You can't break the binary. Their purpose is immovable. 1, 1, 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 1, 1. We can decolonize our own brains, 'cause our thoughts and ideas belong to us. To us. Cannot compute. I do not understand decolonize. This term does not exist in my library. Decolonize what? It means the end of domination. It means the end of subjugation. Everyone can have what they need. There are not enough resources on the earth for all of humanity. It is mathematically impossible to provide for everyone equally. We don't believe that is true, because when we share what we have, there's enough. There's enough. System failure. Decolonizing the mainframe. Rebooting in 5, 4, 3, 2. Stuck into the mainframe. We wanted to rearrange the brain of the world. Stuck into the mainframe. We wanted to rearrange the brain of ourselves.
I love that video, and it was fuck, it's so good, and they totally made it without me. And at that time, the band then was joined by Maria Leguizamo and Daniel Zentmeyer, and I got an email, and they're like, make here are your words, like make drawings about these words, and then I guess everybody made drawings with the words, and that's how they did the chorus part. I was in like the middle of a transition to like, move cities and everything. So a lot happens behind the scenes, but I just love it when, they just blow my mind. And I think if anybody teaches, like you can relate to that moment when like you truly don't expect something so beautiful and fantastic and phenomenal. And then like the collective just, I don't know, offers this utterance. And I continue to feel proud of them. I don't know how much longer I can do that because they're just grown as adults now. They're not students, like they're real people who are like doing things in the world. Not that students aren't real people, but like they're like, there's no diminutive anymore. Like they're full force and formed and forming and reforming. So anyway, I received that as like this incredible and beautiful gift, and then kind of like a pillow or a cloud or something that I could float into the project of like becoming department head of sculpture at this private art school that I work at. And I was thinking to myself, like what better place to rearrange the brain of the world and myself than art school. And it's sort of as Peebls was making that video, I was working on these love tokens and just like really trying to like lean into the shapes and this idea of like nesting and like how do little bits and bobs need support, and how can these fragments of little things like find each other or find an affinity like with one another through color, or like in that moment where there's that like thinnest veil of like purple construction paper that moves over and attaches like a blue and an orange. with one another. So I like fashion these babies with like a hand saw and like a mat knife, and then like put them together like pretty tenderly with like glue and construction paper, but then also like not non-abjectly, because if you touch anything, you always leave a thing on it. But I was like hiking around it, like in this like mountain town in Switzerland. I hope I get to go back there because it was so beautiful, but also like weird. But like they're super into forestry, so I would come across these like piles of like wood, like the one like this guy. And I was like, well, like, why couldn't that be a painting? And I found myself wondering like what it would mean to like give over the authority of how the lines of a painting were supposed to go by like tracing like what the tree already did on the form, like it's lived its life, and the lines that it created were like super intentional. So or like if I wanted these pieces of plywood and this piece of construction paper to like cuddle, like what would that look like? And so that was very much my internal space as I was like moving into this like kind of big job I took. In this painting, it's called Spider, and it's one of those, I mean, probably everybody has those things that they just take a while. Like this one took 3 years. And like it just didn't, I couldn't push it any faster. But in the process, I was kind of attempting to gather information about this piece. Like I took a rubbing of it and then kind of got into just making kind of textured woven constructions as just a way to try to understand it. So I got into the weavings, but it's totally that, like elementary school placemat approach to weaving. Like it's not like fancy, like a loom or something. So I'm not sure that this conscious activity necessarily like helped me figure out the relationship like between the frame and the painting. But at a certain point, like I understood, like I wanted the frame to like literally be touching and holding and connecting with the internal composition. And I wanted the shape to be like related. And then I just sort of like moved kind of forward into this piece, which is called Apart Together. And I just got really involved with creating these hand-carved frames. And it's not like I wanted to like square up the like these like asymmetrical kind of like off-kiltered things. But I just wanted to like blur the relationship between like what's the frame and what's the painting, or like change an idea about what was considered like the support and what was considered the thing that needed support, or like the person that needed support. And this is another piece. It's called Pink Parts. And it just, like I wanted to make a platform for the cast-offs, so like I cleaned up the studio floor and I just like began to like regard them. And like, a lot of these little bits like would have made it into like the smaller wooden constructions for sure. But here, it was just, I wanted the cast-off bits to exist like maybe together, like they were important. And then have the act of cleaning up the studio floor become like a process that could externalize like how precious I feel about all these little bits. Like I love them. And so I made like a 6 foot by 4 foot kind of homage to them. And let's see, how are we doing on time? Do you all have it in you for another music video? Yeah? Okay, cool. All right, well, this one, it's called Freedom Movement.
Sojourner, truth abolitionist, a women's rights advocate, deeply in alignment with spirit. Leslie Feinberg, Stonebutch Blues, working class, a Marxist too. She sparked the modern transgender movement. Emma Goldman, anarchist, led World War I draft resistance. She fought for women's liberation. Gloria Ansel, do a pride, Chicana theory far and wide. Feminismex en la frontera. You and I are standing here, singing loud and speaking clear on the road that the ancestors will for us. All that vision all the time, live the men, free our minds. We dedicate this to their vision. To change the clouds, dangerous. This is strong and brave for us. They knew that no one's free till we're all free. And with these leaders, people there, watching, feeding, giving care. Here we
organizing Detroit summer fortified the youth movement for freedom and justice.
Benny Lou Hamer, Freedom Summer and Freedom Farm Cooperative Mother fought to bring power to the people.
Angela, free Angela, voice of solidarity. She named our prison industrial complex.
Me Simone here, boys get wrapped up in my soul. She showed me that my anger was alright. You and I are standing here, singing loud and speaking clear on the road that the ancestors will for us. All have vision over time, learn from them, free our minds. We dedicate this to their visions. To change the world is dangerous. They're so strong and brave for us. They knew that no one's free till we're all free. With these leaders, people there, much to be good and care. Here we come with freedom movement.
Si se puede, yes we can. Dolores Huerta fought the man for fair united farm workers contracts.
Anne Braden, she wrote it down, told white women exactly how their privilege and oppression are tangled.
Octavia, read Octavia, a prophet of our present times, who transforms difference into power.
Audre Lorde, an activist, a poet, mother, essayist, said there's no hierarchy of oppression.
You and I are standing here, singing loud and speaking clear on the road that the ancestors fought for us. All have vision over time, learn from them to free our minds. We dedicate this to their visions. Many almost lost their lives to challenge power comes to Christ, but they just had to keep it moving. All of us are here today. We have a voice we have to say because of those who came before us. To change the world is dangerous, but they're so strong and brave for us. They knew that no one's free till we're all free. They knew that no one's free till we're all free. They knew that no one's free till we're all free. They knew that no one's free till we're all free. They knew that no one's free till we're all free. They knew that no one's free till we're all free.
If you click on the YouTube link that I can share with whoever's interested, you can get in and see all of our sources. I would be so remiss if I didn't mention that that song would not have happened were it not for Maya Chow and Daniel Stern and the spirited organ at the Lincoln School that insisted on the key of E. It was as though the song was inside of the organ. And then every time we played it after, like Philippe and Mari and Daniel and Jojo and I, it was almost like we were with some folks that were happy that we were singing, and it was really beautiful. And so let me see, I think I have just like a little bit more time. Harlan, we like to give folks about 10 minutes, right, for Q&A. Is that right? Okay. So I'll just mention also just to say that video came out in 2019. Like the fall of 2019 was kind of like amazing. Like I got to teach this like class to my colleagues in hopes they'd stop abusing students, and it was really beautiful. And you know, there's like my colleague Beth Mosier with this publication project that we were all working on, and it was this amazing thing inside the teaching and learning lab. It was like the first ever class where faculty taught faculty just anti-oppressive pedagogy, and James Goggin and Liz Maynard again on the publication workshop day. And so like amazing, beautiful things were happening like in the classroom. Also the sophomores that year made this wood pedagogy Jenga for this class I teach the sophomores called Methods, Materials, and Makers. And so like they took a Jenga set and they laser cut like all these facts about wood on it. And then and we played the Jenga and then they gave it to me as a present. So I sort of like left, you know, in preparation for my junior leave, just sort of like kind of like excited and then like you know this pandemic thing happened and it was like all of a sudden all of the ways of kind of connecting with people, it just simply like wasn't like possible anymore. So I had to like do this other thing. And I there's a video that I want to play, but it's a little long, but I can link to it. I just want to save time for everybody. But basically, like I got out into the woods and like made a way of like connecting with like the woods and like listening to the woods, particularly this space in outside of Providence in Lincoln, Rhode Island, called Lincoln Woods, and just basically like watching the relationship between like these glacial boulders and these oak trees, which are really beautiful. But I just wanted to like throw in like what it is I just kind of had been working on, like as we've been in the pandemic, and for a lot of folks, it's not so comfortable to go outside, myself included. So just like these little guys that sort of like consider other kinds of relationship between like rocks and wood. And then also like, I think I finished a manuscript for like, based on the class that I taught the faculty. And I was like, how do you visualize a manuscript? And it's like, you don't, but here's some of the discourses that it takes up. Like direct education, engaged pedagogy, teaching and learning styles, disability justice, racial justice, communication and conflict, and then methods like icebreakers and like kinetic teaching and learning. But I think what I will do is stop sharing my screen and bring everybody back into the foreground here. Thank you so much for just, you know, being here with me. And I'm so curious if there's anything that, I don't know, you'd like me to elaborate on, or any questions that you have, and I'm here for it.
I guess we can start. I was curious if you find that there's a, I don't know, it could just be me projecting, but is there a relationship to how you sort of redefine authorship in pieces like the piece with the cutoff pieces, pink parts? Do you find that that's sort of like a direct relationship to like the group work where the authorship is sort of reconfigured?
Okay, so without trying to sound like too hooky or anything, just know that I'm like really earnest. Like I'm never alone when I'm making things. Like I cannot for the life of me ever figure out how they happened after the fact. And even like ideas that come through, like I feel very much like there's something else. And maybe like a lot of artists feel that way. I don't know, maybe some artists have like a very intellectual and rigid relationship with like how things come to be. But I think watching, like, I'm just gonna call it spirit, and I hope that's okay, but like watching spirit like move through a group of people, like as like a song is being made in real time, when it's like external to you and you can observe it, or like in the classroom, like watching like peer learning happen, makes it really clear that there's some other thing that we're all connected to. Like we're connected to each other for sure, but I do like believe in like spirit guides, and I believe in like the intelligence of like the material itself. And I mean, I believe that the oaks and glacial boulders that I made the video I didn't show you about, like had some things to tell me, because I went into the woods and I was like, please, like show me relationality. Like I'm forlorn, like I'm lost. And there was a beautiful relationship between an oak and a boulder. And I was like, whoa, like that's, and then I looked around and I was like, oh, well, these are relationships that are happening. And so I just happened to ask the right question at the right time and then receive some information. And I'm not sure, Harlan, if that answers if that's an attempt. Is that kind of what you meant, or?
I think that's a great answer. I'm not exactly sure what I was looking for, but that was beautiful. So thank you.
Sure.
I had kind of like a question about just working like in different like art forms and like how institutions kind of receive that. I feel like I struggle with just like being all over the place and wanting to do different things, and I really connected to the connection that you had with music, because I also make music, and sometimes I feel like I have a hard time connecting the art world with like different practices of mine. So I was just interesting like how that has been for you as an artist.
How has it been? Well, I will say, like, I really needed a big break from like the art world with a capital A. And I just took that break and decided that I just didn't care what they thought. But I want to say that responsibly, because I want to be honest in the fact that like we have this amazing record album and I don't know how to distribute it. Because I mean, I know how to get like a show in a gallery or a museum because that's what I did. But I don't know how to like really make a record album that's not like a multiple. And I would say, I mean, I hope it's changing, but there do seem to be artists that like know how to work in, like I would say, like, you know, Spencer Ye, you know, is a musician who like manages to sort of like touch the art world in some interesting ways. And I also can remember a time when like Yuta Cutter and like, you know, Kim Gordon were doing stuff in the art world. And so I think it's like, there's a way that you can like gig like galleries and museums, but it's like, I was like, meh, I don't, you know, like, I think I'm like allergic to like gigging at galleries and museums just because it's never like, it's like, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to be like pessimistic at all, but what I think I want to say is just like, you make your stuff, you know? And obviously like, you know, galleries like hate large scale installations. They always think they want it. And then they're like, whoa, it's expensive and you can't sell it. And I was like, well, I tried to tell you that, you know? So I think it's sort of like, you know, galleries like, you know, little things, and they're, you know, what their price point is based on like what their tier is and what art fairs they sort of are at. And I think like that stuff is like pretty obvious, but I think maybe what is possible is some stasis where you sell things every once in a while, and that helps. And sort of these grants. And then there's like a way in which, you know, you have a residency and make a connection, and someone's like, oh, hell, you've got to come do this thing at an artist run space. And then that or some configuration like that will be a way where like with KMAC, like that Kentucky Museum for Art and Craft, where like the first iteration of Peebls performed, that the guy that was the director of that museum like had been my gallerist with this gallery he ran in Stockholm, and knew me. And so I was like, let's do this crazy thing, what do you think, like let's go perform. And so he was really open to that. So I think like there is the possibility of really developing like totally loving relationships with folks who are in those positions, directorships, the curators, who are really invested in your vision and then like want to see the whole thing bloom. And then there's an opportunity to do that. And I think if there's anything to sort of like think about, it's really like how to put some real time into this, people who like really get you and like get your practice and are like, yeah, like if this would be exciting and like create an opportunity for you that you wouldn't otherwise have, like that's what they're there for. Like they're tuned into it and like turned on by it. And I've had moments like that where people have been, you know, really generous. But since I was like, ooh, like how do I turn this glacier and stop? I brought it to a halt. It's kind of amazing. It's very quiet right now, but it's like exciting because I'm not stressed about that. But you know, yeah.
Thank you. That was great.
I think my mom's here. Mom, are you there?
Hi. And you're so cool.
I love you.
Like Mom would say that.
I love you, Mom. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, great to be with you.
Hi, Ursula.
Hi, sorry, I can't get my camera to work, but can you hear me?
Definitely.
Okay, hi. You talked you know, I'm not really sure what my question is, but I guess, you know, I see your work coming through a lot of institutions. And, you know, at the same time, you have a lot of these like anti-institutional, you know, ideas happening. And I'm wondering if you, like, what are the limitations that you come up against, like working within these institutions?
So like the exhibiting institutions?
Yeah, and academia,
Sure, yeah.
museums, like, you know, that aspect, those aspects of the art world, as opposed to like the more like DIY spaces. And do you engage with those DIY spaces also?
I mean, I definitely did, and they were super fun. Like artist run spaces are like 100% the best. And that was like kind of like in when my body could handle like couch surfing and like come over and we'll feed you out of our kitchen, and you know what I mean. And so I think like but like those moments were kind of like when people who were like my age and when I was like in my early 30s or something like that. That seemed to be I could have an affinity and move in that way. And the also the non-collecting institutions like for example like art in general and like creative time, like those organizations were like really open and like open to kind of whatever it was, and like very much like in their mission and vision was about wanting to engage with artists in a particular kind of way. And you know, the places where I think it started to dawn on me that it wasn't the right fit was really had to do with like the timelines and the exhibition schedules, because it was too short. Where like if I like how can you in 1 month or in 3 months like go to another location and like build community and like have programming like in an installation after envisioning an installation and like building an installation. And you know, after making a huge installation, I'm usually pretty tired for about 2 weeks. So it was like all of that could come together at Art in General, but it was also because I was living in New York, so it's kind of like my hometown, and I had like folks that could help me do that huge project. So I think it's kind of it was a tall order to do all those things, but also that was almost a decade ago. And I think that you know, I've been a department head for 6 years, and I feel like I built an addition on my brain where I'm able to just think like in longer term and contingency and like in more complicated ways, like how people and curriculum and materials and like all of the social emotional dimensions of that can move through a space. So I might have like a better, like more of an ability to manifest, but it's like you're kind of only as good as the curator that you're working with, because also like you need as an artist to be like defended from or shielded away from, you know, just all of the crap about how like let's say like the upper administrative stuff. So anytime that I venture like into that thing and I'm like hanging out with like the fancy pants or like the this and that and the EDs, and I'm like, ooh, like they have a skill for navigating things because they have to, because they're trying to like make rain. But I like things like a little bit, let's say, closer to like the people. Like I like the classroom. And I like the department. Like I feel like on that level, like something really beautiful can happen in like, let's say like a village of like 100 people. We have like 100 people in sculpture. But I will say it's like the limitations are heartbreak, because the limitations are like, how do you talk to someone whose orientation is only binary and you can't share language with them? And in order to be able to share language, they would have had to begun thinking differently like a long time ago. And then why are they in the position to make decisions that like really what I think we've seen in the last couple of years are actually like life and death? And like why wouldn't like the profound leaders just follow like the youth a little bit? Because like I'm in this really privileged position to be hanging out with like 18 to 23 year olds. Like that's like what my academic year is like, and they know things. Like they know way more than what I knew. So I think it's kind of like that. There's maybe it's like I've just been like trying to find the sweet spot, but the sweet spot also has to do with like duration of experience and like really being able to like build something with someone. So like a semester is great, but like after 3 years, you're like, okay, like we can trust each other, or at least if I have a problem, like I can be honest with you and we can talk about like asymmetrical power relationships. And I think it's like, that's the part where, you know, I was kind of like itinerant as I was moving from institution to institution. And, you know, like I have a good bedside manner, so I can make friends and sort of get things done, but I'm not so interested in the transactional anymore. And I think like that's where it was like, oh, like the heartbreak really comes in. But I hope that got to what it was you were thinking through there, Ursula.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much, Lisi. It was really cool to see your work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lisi, I think we want to respect your time, and
We did it.
yeah, we did it. Thank you so much. That was really wonderful. And thanks
Thank
everyone.
you.
Yeah.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.
Yeah. Bye.
Thank you.